Hi, everybody, and welcome to a new episode of Tabletop Technicians Network. We're now done with the character stat focused streams that we did, and now we're moving up to creating worlds, lore deep dives. And today we're going to start with the setting created by Technomancer Kyle,
Hello.
NovArchaic. Eternal GM is also supposed to join us.
Character stat focused.
Oh wait, sorry. I always forget to mute the stream. So if you just heard my voice double, sorry about that. Anyway, yes. As I was saying, Eternal Gem is also supposed to be joining us. I'm not sure where he is, but I guess since the main attraction of the show tonight is Technomancer Kyle, I think we should be able to start and hope that he joins us later on. So, are you ready, Kyle?
I'm as ready as I'm ever gonna be.
Excellent. So,
Yes.
how about we start with you just giving us the baseline of your setting? What kind of genre is it? Just give us like the bare bones foundation of what it actually is.
Okay. So base bare bones genre. I normally describe it as a modern day science fantasy. Because there's a lot of fantasy elements, there is some science fiction elements. I do my best to try and merge those into one core experience, one core story. When it comes to genres, I mean, it is still what one could say a kitchen sink system, in the sense that it has like core fundamentals for you to be able to play with everything, including the kitchen sink, within one thing to hit that sort of niche. When it comes to the setting, I like to describe the experience that it's just about like average people becoming more than average to tackle, crazy odds, take on huge challenges. So
Yeah, sorry, I just accidentally forgot that I'm streaming the Discord and just switched it. I was to the chat. Could you maybe write to Eternal GM asking where he is?
okay.
Sorry, as you see, I'm highly professional. Everybody.
We are all professionals here, and by
Yes.
professional we mean like
as we are not getting paid, we do not have any experience from before. We're just trying to survive here.
Exactly.
Which reminds me, speaking of highly professional, I forgot to turn off notifications. So now, thankfully, I remembered that before suddenly just having bling on the stream or something like that.
Fair enough.
So, all right. Then I was hoping that Eternal GM would also bring in some questions. So I guess I would just start with some questions. What inspired you to make this setting? Like, what was the initial idea that pushed you towards making this?
So it started because I wanted to run a very particular game back in 2011. At the time, I've always had the urge to want to run a modern fantasy sort of game, because I like the idea of not only having magic, but being able to call somebody on a cell phone. Right? Like, giving people a lot of tools and having absurd challenges based on the fact of having those tools. That sort of because having high tech, having that sort of thing. And I wanted to run a particular game. I think there was a game I wanted to run that was like, I think it was a gang versus gang, but like with magic, sort of gang violence, but like, with people, instead of shooting guns, it was shooting fireballs. And the options at the time in 2011 wasn't really that spectacular. We had D20 Modern, which was all right, but I didn't like the balance between the different class aspects. And of course, D20 Modern is based off of 3.5, the Dragon game.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, it was even more different. And there was just a lot of things and that I didn't like from it. I didn't like the idea of classes and all that. And so I just kind of wanted to do my own thing. And since I was doing my own thing, I was like, well, I should develop a setting to go along with that. But yeah, it was just kind of I want to do this. Not many great tools at the time. And honestly, it was because my roommate looked at me and was like, because I was complaining that there was no great systems. And he was like, why don't you just make one? And I was like, right. Yeah, that's fair. So I blame him for this this whole journey that I've been on for as long as I have.
I mean, don't you enjoy this journey?
Oh yeah, no, I do. It still doesn't mean that I can't use the word blame, right? Like, so yeah, I definitely went and did that. I started working on it, and I mean, it started off as just some bare-base hack that was just taking all the problems I disliked about D20 Modern and just making them better. But then I started to like actually do a lot more research into proper game design because I started to really get into game design and setting design and all that. And so I just kind of like, let me take some time to slow burn this project. I'm going to work on other projects. And while I do that, I'm going to do actual world building. I made a couple variations of a setting Bible, if you will, which I actually don't have anymore because moving around, you lose things.
Oh, that's too bad.
I've been slowly rebuilding one on digital, so. But I mean, I do have a lot of that setting and stuff inside my head, so I do have a good portion of things, and I've told a lot of people of different stories and settings and timelines, etc. But I mean, yeah, it all started because I was complaining.
I mean, do not all great inventions start with a problem?
Mm-hmm. You're right. I mean, and it's been one heck of a journey, for sure, trying to figure out, because one of the things I like to do and I like to turn around and try to do is take the normal fantasy tropes and just apply them and kind of figure out how can they be applied to make a better world, or can I twist them to be unique and interesting? And so, like, yeah.
All right. Do you want to add something else, or?
I'm trying to decide how much I should add, and because when Eternal comes back, I don't know if like I'm gonna have to repeat some of this. So,
Has he answered anything?
not to me yet, no.
Too bad. Hope that everything's all right on his side.
Yeah.
I mean, yesterday when I met up with Ian, his internet also just kind of did not work for hours, and we had to postpone our meeting. So, who knows, maybe Eternal Jim is having a similar problem.
Yeah.
All
Okay.
right, then let me just continue with my questions.
Hmm.
Does your setting have an underlying message or underlying philosophy? And if so, what is it?
One of the core things is that you are better off with friends and connections. Everyone is, just because there are things that they can do that you can't. Uh, there is no one true hero, except it takes. If you want to see change, you have to be it, and that's something that I like to hit on a lot. When the stories I write, the games I run, that if you decide to do nothing, nothing happens.
Mhm. All right, yeah. Next question. It's a multiversal setting, right? Which were or sort like okay, a splintered world more, I guess.
Yeah, so
Mm.
I mean, if you want me to, I can get into specifics on that just to
I
cover
mean,
it
that
more time.
wasn't going to be my questions, but sure. Whatever you can do to fill up the time. I wasn't expecting to be the only person asking questions. Okay, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
So we need any help we can get to fill the 2 hours. If Eternal doesn't show up, so
Yeah, no, I
please
get you.
explain.
Yeah, so multidimensional is kind of correct. So this is actually one of my favorite bits of lore because it came to me trying to solve a couple of problems within the setting, as well as with the system. I want to give the tools of creation to GMs, but that also means that I want to still have a consistent story and world at a core level. So to be able to do that, my thought was like, okay, I'll just have a core world, right? Then all of the basic options are just basic options. Okay, cool. That's generically awesome. That being said, I still needed to expand upon, and how will I be able to add in more stuff or be able to kind of, because it is a kitchen sink sort of
Hmm.
system, a kitchen sink setting. So that means that eventually I'm going to be throwing in and adding in so much random stuff that I'm going to need ways of explaining how this stuff, why this stuff wasn't there prior,
Hmm.
right? As well as if somebody wanted to make their own stuff to add in, how would they be able to do that? Besides just them going and making their own setting, right? Because sometimes you want to be able to do your own thing, but maybe not write your entirely your own setting.
Hmm.
So I came up with the idea of what I call for the fractures of reality. So the sort of lore of it is that way back in the past, before magic had left our world, there was a big evil, which I don't really go into fully what that evil was, because I kind of want to allow the GMs to kind of percolate on that to kind of expand it in their own way. But there was a big
Ah.
evil that the only way for them to stop was to split magic, was to take magic and split it into different chunks, right? But these people were still learning how the rules of magic wasn't really like a super advanced societies, and they didn't split it perfectly, creating these fractures of reality, creating these like unique locations, these unique worlds that like exist in a fractured reality that, you know, maybe they still have magic over there, and because they had a very specific type or a specific mana structure over there, it kind of grew and changed things in a unique way. um in the modern setting, the when the action starts for the setting for this the new age, right? But the modern
Hmm.
age, these fractures are starting to come back because I've always explained it as like the core world is in the center, and then the fractures was eventually spreading apart. But like there's rubber bands around them, eventually they hit a point where now they're being crushed back towards. So there was like a danger there, and one of the first adventures that I ran actually dealt with that. How do you stop these realities from crushing into each other? But they're still coming back, introducing things. So you get all these fractures of realities. Like one of them I have is based off of Norse mythos of Elfenheim, is what I called it. But I've also kind of expanded it to add in some other not Norse things, because again, these fractures wasn't perfect. So I kind of threw in there to where I did with a lot of the like Fey courts as well as some Norse stuff. But when it comes to the Fey courts, of course there is one for each like season. The one of winter dealt with death, and I actually said or set that the death magic was the most strong there, because that was where those magical ley lines, those magical energies actually resided. There was great artifacts that was there that kept that magic around, which meant that for the entire time that magic had been separated, the Winter Court was able to create dominance and kind of take over that area, and creating its own little story. And there's a couple other of those sort of things with fractures, trying to create these unique little pocket reality dimensions. So
that not defining the great evil kind of reminds me of the morning in Eberron, where the setting itself doesn't tell you what caused that apocalyptic event, and it gives the GM room to fill that in. Do you have other areas that you're purposefully leaving vague so that GMs can fill them out?
Yes. I haven't actually gone and created like a full list of like deities and saying that these are the deities of the world, because arguably there could be deities based off of each fraction, right? Like fracture, there could be, an expanding amount of them. And B, I kind of want to let people do what they want with those. I have some core powers and capabilities with that, and some sort of stuff based upon that. But for the most part, that is still an area that I'm allowing GMs to kind of figure out. Because honestly, that is still a thing that I think most GMs will want to do themselves. I have not met many GMs that are just like, I'm always going to use the gods of which, are given to me as options. That being said, there are also the thing is, I think for most of the stuff that happened in the quote unquote past, right, is stuff that I'm leaving up to the GM to fill in. The stuff that is happening in the now, it also kind of fits that, but I'm still more likely to give at least more nods to what I was thinking for it. One of the things that I haven't actually haven't created the stat block for, because I haven't figured out exactly how I wanted to. I kind of wanted to also leave in sort of like a nebulousness, and that was a creature that was created kind of like a living cursed creature that was created because of the fracturing. That's just its entire purpose is to hunt magic in the core like world, right? Like high powerful magic. It will hunt that down. And it was created because of the way that they fractured it. But like, why does it exist? I'm not going to write that down, right? I'm not going to say why does it exist. I'm mostly going, how it hunts, I might write some things down, but not much. Just enough to give the GM sort of like an idea. If they want to use it here, awesome, cool. But if you're going to use it, you kind of have full control over, why and how. I mean, to a degree, that's also just how I handle a lot of the creatures' design. I normally do design where I kind of do what you do in your system, but less for each level. All creatures I've made have only been level 1. And then I just say, go ahead, level them up how you want to level them up. And just because of that, just because maybe they want to level them up in a very weird way. And I have a lot of ways to do that. But
that does seem like it could become a lot of work on higher level games for GMs. But
right.
let's say focus on the lore.
That's fine.
You mentioned gods. What's the story behind the gods? Have they always existed? Are they manifestations of faith of the people? What are they?
So I haven't really delved too much into them, mostly because it really depends on each one. So I am going to go ahead and during this stream, I'm going to talk about something that I haven't actually talked to many other people, and that is a planned, we'll call it adventure setting, if you will. So what are gods? I'll kind of answer that, and that is gods are powerful beings, some of them with actual proper divinity, and some of them, because of that, are more than life. But because of the way that I've kind of designed things and whatnot, some gods still can be taken out. The way that is because of the core of them. They're essentially super powerful beings. Actually, there is one god that I have actually kind of talked about, and that's because I worked with Twitter a while back to create a quote-unquote deity of one of the other fractures of reality. And it was really just the person who made that fracture. It was a wizard, a hidden folk that was kind of a mad scientist of magic. Okay. Something happened. They got a lot of power, and then people when the whole fracture happened, he finding out that it was going to happen was like, well, that's going to mess up my experiments. So I'm just going to kind of pocket dimension myself away. But again, as in all the times that they had done this, not all of them, the magic wasn't a perfect science. He kind of grabbed extra towns that he didn't mean to, that was close by enough. And so he kind of created this own little pocket dimension that was going to be filled of his creations, as well as some of the creatures that lived near him, some of the sentient people and stuff like that. And those sentient people started to believe that he was a god, because especially the ones that lived there for so long, or that was born in that pocket dimension, that created fracture, they started to believe into him being a god. And so that divinity spark happened. Some other things happened to increase his power level. He became super powerful. As he became more powerful, he just kind of into a situation where he has powers that are very similar to what one would call it a god in the setting. Like being able to have sort of like a champion, be able to bless somebody and be like, go fight for me, go do this thing, I'm giving you my power. But he is still immortal, right? Like to a degree, he's still mortal. He has lived for like thousands of years, but like he could eventually properly die. And with that, because he can die and he does have magic within him, he is a what I call like a magical nexus. You could kill him and absorb that energy, right? You don't really necessarily become the god that he was, because that could also kill you if you absorb so much that your body can't handle, because that's just a lot of pure energy in and of itself.
Too much XP.
But, huh?
Too much XP.
So what? Yeah, too much XP all at once. But there is a whole thing that I had some weapons and things designed that would store that sort of amount of energy to be able to use them in unique ways. And that was part of a planned thing that I had put down. So the question is like, at what point do they become not able to be killed, when they become proper deities and stuff like that? And that's not something that I have fully defined, and I don't know if I actually am going to fully define that.
Also a question. Our Earth is one of the fractures, right?
The core world is what I call it.
Does that fracture also have gods? And if so, are they based on real mythology?
So, I mean, they do have our real mythologies. Thus, in theory, would have those gods. I just haven't. I haven't statted out those. I haven't decided to what point are they divine and how people can interact with them, because of having to weigh the question of what do I want to do with that. But people can have devotion towards them, and you can get powers for that devotion. Right? There is actually devotion-based things. So, yes, they are. Right now, they are at the stage of not killable, just because I don't know if I want them to be quote-unquote killable. I guess killable is probably
they are
not the right term.
at least some degree real, right?
Right. They have. They would be like super duper uber powerful, right? Like. One of the system things is that right now no character can get past level 10, because I mean at level 10 you become stupidly powerful, and I just feel like those sort of gods would be, especially based off of their divine lore, right? Like the sort of stuff that the accomplishments they have done, they would definitely be past that, especially when you consider that was just divine lore written before the fracture. If they are real and there is stuff that's going on, they would have gotten stronger. Though maybe they're in a fracture themselves, right? Maybe that's something that could be really interesting to have players do. Is there is some sort of, well, for the Roman gods, a Mount Olympus fracture, right? Of course, that depends on how you want to do the story, and like it could be really interesting. I just have not, like I said, I haven't done that much building systematically on them yet. But like stated, they would be very powerful, and they definitely have the capability of giving powers based on someone's devotion.
All right. Do you have a favorite fracture?
I have so favorite can be taken a couple of different ways. The easiest one for me to write for, which is favorite just because it's easy to write for, would be our core world fracture, right? Because I just could take in what sort of information I want from the core our world and just apply it to that fracture. But I guess I have two favorites. Of course, I really do like Elfheim, just because I do like some of the lore I've written for that area. I think that it's very interesting and unique. And I like the one of which I kind of already talked about the wizard who made his own little pocket dimension and accidentally brought in because, well, he has that fracture is actually kind of where a lot of the science fiction comes from, as of right now. Yeah, he was a wizard, but he was more of like an inventor wizard. He was taking magic and applying it to machines.
Huh.
And so I call that fracture because I don't have a great name for it. I call that fracture the scrapyard because one of the things is literal heaps of stuff. And actually, I created that location a little bit more into the lore of creation, not of the lore of actual the setting. Is that I created that because I wanted to have gremlins, but gremlins in the sense of not like the fantasy version of them, but like where they came from within our world, in the sense of like our terms of gremlins actually comes from uh, legends of little creatures that would pop up into planes in like World War One and Two and like just take away parts and cause those planes to crash. They blamed the gremlins on them. Like if there was a machine that wasn't working right, it was because a gremlin had ate apart or something. And so I was like, that sounds really cool. I want to be able to have something like that. So I was like, okay, would be a gremlin? It would be a small creature. Cool. That eats metal. And because of the fracture world, I needed it to be not in a fracture that was quote unquote too far away to where it could, before the world started coming back, the fracture starting to come back, that it could jump in and out, right? And so I created the scrapyard for that location and have been adding more into it. And I've even, so far, one of the things about gremlins is actually they are gnomes and goblins that have been magically changed because of living in that fracture.
Was there ever a time that you had kind of like a writer's block while designing the world, or some place that was challenging where you didn't quite know what to do with specific fractures or something like that?
Yeah. So I have technically been working on the system, on the setting, for 11 years, right? On and off, because I had to actually go to college, and I had to try and work a full-time job trying to make sure that I didn't like starve and die.
Food is overrated, and those warm beds, who needs that?
I mean, I prefer a cold bed, to be honest. Which is at a detriment to my wife. She hates that it gets so cold, but I'm over here like, but I'm nice. Everything's great.
Hi, Marshall. Nice for you to join us. Okay.
So have I had writer's block? Yes. A lot of times, actually. There was some times where I couldn't focus on it, and so I kind of like had to stop. There's been times where there's been times where I had, the opposite of a writer's block, I guess, where I just can't stop thinking about ideas, especially when I wasn't really supposed to be. Being at work or something and just being like, I need to write this down, but I can't. But I have definitely had writer's block. Sometimes, and the best time that the best solution I've ever had to writer's block has been to work on something else. just to kind of take a step back away from it and assess things. Of course, sometimes that leads to me going, well, I screwed the pooch. I need to restart this section of things because I wrote myself into this wall and didn't realize it.
Mm-hmm. To comment on Marshall's life always gets in the way of creativity, I would say yes, but I would also say without life, we wouldn't have any source of our creativity. Our art is intertwined with our experience, so
Mm-hmm.
be it positive or
It's
negative.
very true. Very true.
Yeah. You cannot be an artist in a vacuum. And I'm not saying this like artist in a hoity-toity way. I don't like it when people say like, "Oh, you're not a true artist." Or so like, no, if you're making something and you're calling it art, you're an artist. It's a different story if you're a good artist,
Mm-hmm.
but you are an artist if you create stuff and you're calling it out. Like that's my personal definition. No gatekeeping
Yeah.
about, oh, you're not a true artist just because you have zero skills. Like, yeah, you didn't have any skills either when you started, so.
Yeah, that's starting is you don't have skills.
Speaking of
You don't have this.
starting,
Yeah.
I presume you had worked on the settings before that, right? Or
Mhm.
was this your first real setting?
It was the first time I started getting in depth with setting creation. Because I had made settings before, because I had been, let's see, I have been playing in tabletops for a long time. But I think it was about 6 years before the start of this was when I started running games. And even then, before then, I was still writing. I actually, back in middle school, I wrote a couple of different stories and things like that. One comedy, one legendary, one sort of like action adventure story. Got to a point where, like, just for the sake of it, my mom had actually got me a little like because we couldn't afford a computer, but she got me a typewriter.
Ah.
And that was fun to use. But
True old school writer, huh?
mm-hmm. But then I eventually got a computer, and I haven't really went back to using a typewriter. I don't own that typewriter anymore, and typewriters are too expensive nowadays.
I mean, makes sense. Antiquated technology that most people don't buy isn't mass produced anymore, and that mass production is usually what keeps prices reasonable. So
Mass production, but also just the fact that there's not many people who can repair them. And so even if you find one that has like that's broken, it may cost it may be cheap to get, but it may be just a giant paperweight because you don't have the capability of fixing what's wrong with it.
I think I've written like once or twice on a typewriter. I think my parents had one when I was a really young. Like there's a memory in the back of my head that I kind of remember typing on it and being like, and just typing random letters because it was fun.
Mm-hmm. It is fun, definitely, because it has that the special oof when you press a button. You just feel that like, yeah, and it just feels so good just to click the button. But then you press too many of them at once, and you get them all like kind of stuck together. So you have to like no, I guess it depends on what type of typewriter, but.
All right. Let's see if I can improvise more questions. Like I said, The Joe GM was
You
like,
had
"Yeah, I've got questions prepared," and I was okay. I've got a few, so I don't just sit silently here. But you know, Kyle is
it's
going
all
to be the
good.
main talker. Tell GM's got like the color covered, and I'm just gonna sit here. And it's okay that I'm tired. And now I'm like, oh my god, I I have to initialize all the conversations.
Yeah, no, I get you. I mean,
Let's.
there's a couple of different things we can talk about. I mean, if you can't think of something, a question to
Is
ask.
there? I got something. Are there universal rules that apply to all shards, or does everyone
Mhm.
have its own laws of physics/reality?
So I will say that most shards apply the same core laws of physics, and that's just the sort of consistency sort of thing that I didn't want to stray too far from too many assumptions. Now, if it's more of a super magical place, like we kind of talked about, like the potentiality of having like a Mount Olympus. Maybe I would, when designing a Mount Olympus sort of concept, maybe I would want to change some of the core rules of uh, that laws of physics in that area. But like that would be more of unique experience, not a no matter where you're going, the rules are going to constantly change. The rules are consistent within the reasons that they exist. The only rules that really change would be the laws of magic, right? And
Mm-hmm.
even then, they're not changing too much. It's just because the laws of magic haven't been, well, scienced, right? They don't understand the laws of magic. So things are a little bit more hairy on that part.
Does a spell work that works in one shard work in all others? Because you're saying the laws of magic are different, or is it like a shard where no magic works, or where the magic is amplified, or where it results in something completely different?
So the intent will always be the same. Thus, what it will do is arguably very similar. One of the first things I could kind of go into it, even though this kind of gets into kind of the system, but I'm going to explain it through a story, sort of little bit,
Mm-hmm.
is that all spells, even though I have like a list of pre-made spells, all spells are actually more flexible. Uh, so even though there is like a fireball spell, you can change that spell to work how you yourself would want it to work at a player's level, or even at a GM's level to some degree, right? Like if you wanted the fireball to do massive fire damage and set things on fire, you can do that. If you wanted things to actually resist being set on fire by the fireball, you can change those rules.
Mm-hmm.
Um, which kind of goes into the setting of, or the jumping into the fractures, is that each fracture may change those spells through the tagging system themselves. Maybe, actually, no, I've already kind of explained one, right? I said when we was talking about the fractures that the Elfenheim has a likeness to magic that is associated with the dead, right?
Mm-hmm.
So everything that goes with going and doing dead things are super powerful, will have unique things that will happen when they are cast, right? When you start doing stuff there with that, things will change, right? But if
Mm-hmm.
you do the opposite of that spell, right? So maybe instead of death, it's life, just for that would be the opposite, and so those spells would change. They may have additional things added or so taken away from them because of the sort of magical flex. So the rules don't. You won't be able to not cast a spell, but what that spell does is definitely or potentially going to change depending on what fracture you're in. Though the intent is always going to be the same.
All right. Is there something you learned about world building while working on this setting?
One of my favorite lessons when it comes to world building is something we've already touched on, and that's especially when you're world building for others, is to give them the tools to add in their own stuff. While yes, you can make a wonderful setting and world to write a story in that you are going to be the only writer, and it's going to be a great setting with a bunch of lore that's going to be delicious and fun to listen about. That's not going to be the best settings to play in. And so when you're building settings for others to play in, make sure that they have. You're not just building a sandcastle and say, okay, now play with that, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's more of like, okay, I started building the sandcastle. This is where I'm at. Here's the bucket, and all these other tools and some shovels and whatnot. Go have fun. Add on to it. Maybe I'm going to go collect some seashells while you add in your own flair to this thing, okay? And do that sort of thing. The better settings are the ones where it's a collaborative effort from everyone involved.
Are there specific media, movies, video games, or something like that that inspired parts of your setting or foundations of your setting?
Yes. So honestly, and that was another thing that I used to do when I started to feel a little bit of creative uh, writer's block. That's the word I was looking for. Is that when I started to feel writer's block, sometimes I just associated with maybe I needed to get some inspiration from devouring some material that would kind of help me with that issue, right? Like maybe, yeah. So when it comes to the different things, one of my favorite video games that there are a couple of video games that I'm thinking of that gave me a little bit of inspiration of sort of like the feel, even though they kind of did their own thing, and they're closer to being like more fantasy, but like just the concept of them really gave me some flair, and that was the Final Fantasy Tactics Advanced. Specifically because at the beginning of the game, you're just a bunch of kids throwing snowballs at each other in like the modern day setting of like France or something. And one of the kids finds a magical book, and then you all read it, and then you all get transported into the magical world of Final Fantasy. Right?
For all
And
those
so it's
kids to get traumatized by war crimes.
I mean,
Whimsical adventures for the whole family.
When you play Final Fantasy Tactics Advance, yes, that is exactly, yep, war crimes everywhere.
I mean, I've never played it. I'm just presuming. I know, like, roughly that it's a strategy games, fantasy setting. So, yeah, I'm just presuming if you throw a bunch of kids right into a medieval war, that will leave psychological scars.
Right. And like it's really interesting. It was a Game Boy Advance game, but like if you ever have a chance to play it or watch someone or at least read about it, I think that it's really interesting game to kind of like experience. Just because there is some really interesting things they did with it. That being said, Final Fantasy is normally a great inspiration because a lot of the settings that they do come up with are more modern day, or at least science fantasy. Again,
Hmm.
I call it science fantasy because that's kind of the gist that I want to go with. I want to have magic, but I also want to have robots.
So you're a big
Um,
Final Fantasy fan.
I am for the most part. Not all of them are ones that I've played and enjoyed, but like there's a good chunk of them that I was like, this was a great game, great story. Or maybe because I'm a fan, there's times where I look back and going, I loved the concept of it, but maybe I hated the writing. Specifically, I was very I my favorite Final Fantasy is actually Final Fantasy 12. Great sort of
Yeah.
like setup and such, but they ruined the game by making the main character who they made the main character.
I'm trying to like sort 12. What was I'm just going to Google it. Final Fantasy. If I see pictures, I probably can say, "Oh yeah, it was that Final Fantasy."
Yeah.
Uh,
Final
yeah, I
Fantasy
thought
12.
yes, that one. Yeah, I thought of
Yep.
yep that. I
Yep.
did
Main
hear
character.
that the protagonist was supposed to be a bit whiny or something like that, or not sympathetic
Right.
at least.
Right. That was kind of one of the issues was like it. So actually, we as a fan base had found out that the original main character was supposed to be another individual, actually one of the members of the party, but the corporate of Square Enix was like, no, 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 we can't have a late 20-year-old main character. People won't like that. We
Oh
have to
no.
go with a kid, right? Because that is what we've always done. We've always had kids be the main characters.
Culprit at it again.
So they introduced out of nowhere Vaughn, the main character, who had no real reason besides their brother dying in this war to be a part of the story, which he would not have even known if he just didn't accidentally into the scenarios. It wasn't even like brought up for the longest time. Like it was like a very weak like connection to him towards the main plot. But if you kind of go in with the idea that this other character was supposed to be the main character, especially with how everything is written, everything makes more sense and it's a much better story. Just because, and what's really funny is the character which was supposed to be the main character has a line that is literally, I won't die because I'm the main character.
Uh, that actually
Which,
reminds me. Which yes,
no, just go ahead. I'm laughing.
that reminds me of a character of a comic that I once wanted to write. Who he's a bit meta. He is actually a manifestation of the soul and body of the narrator, and he knows that. And he has this huge "I'm the protagonist" arrogance.
Mm-hmm.
And in the first main boss he fights, completely annihilates him. Just because he ran totally unprepared into the battle, just like, I'm the protagonist, I'm going to win, and just gets crushed. and then
Yeah.
and then actually another character was destined to defeat that enemy. So that kind of energy reminds me. Yeah, I'm the protagonist, but I presume in this story, the guy was actually right that he had more plot armor.
He was supposed to be the. Well, he did have plot armor, like all of the main characters essentially had
Mm-hmm.
plot armor, or the main characters. But they did focus as Vaughn as the storytelling thing, but it just when you have them as the storytelling but like not giving them a reason to exist, it just kind of felt really awkward with the story.
Yeah,
Um, Go ahead.
actually, I think 3 chapters in, I specifically killed that character off to show nobody has plot armor. You cannot just rely on everybody surviving just because they're the main protagonist group. And he was sort of the main protagonist of the main group at that time, and just nope. Nobody's safe. The story isn't as brutal as, let's say, Game of Thrones, right, where just kill off characters left and right. But
Yeah,
I specifically killed off that character to show, don't get too sure that your favorite character might survive. I mean, he was kind of falling off grace. Part of the plot is actually, since he's only a projection of the soul and the body, he doesn't have a spirit. Therefore, he does not has a conscience. So he starts slipping further and further into dark tendencies.
I see.
But yeah, okay, I'm moving much towards.
No, it's fine.
I mean, I guess we have to fill the 2 hours somehow, right? I mean,
Right.
technically, we don't have to stream for 2 hours. If we do not find enough topics, then we can stop. But yeah, I shouldn't stop myself for just natural talking and also a bit about my stuff, right?
Right.
It's
it's always better if we just kind of flow things together and just kind of move back into things eventually.
Kai thinking, this is my stream. Stop talking about your stuff.
No, it's fine. Dude, I made no assumptions. Honestly, it seems like you're more upset than I am.
Yeah. Now I know why you prefer cold baths, because you have this infernal rage inside. Yeah. Totally real image I'm projecting here of you here live on stream.
Yeah, no, that's exactly how I am. I can't believe you had me dead to rights on that.
Yeah. Anyway, all right. Let's see if I can think of another question for your setting. Pastoral sci-fi. How many fractures do you have you invented already?
So, just for the sake of clarification, do you mean ready for people to play games with related to, or ready as in?
I think I purposefully did not say ready, as I wanted to imply that yes, these are fractures where you at least have a base idea of.
Mm-hmm. So there is obviously the three that we've kind of talked about: the core world, the Alpine, and the Scrapyard. I have in my back pocket. I have the Lost World, which first time I've talked about it is dinosaurs. Yes. But
dinosaurs with feathers.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's dinosaurs and a sentient dinosaurs. So there's the animal group of dinosaurs, of ancient dinosaurs, and then sentient dinosaurs that are actually better at stabilizing fractures than not. And the main thing is they actually are the ones that came up with the system before these other the original group did it. And that explains how in NovArch's lore where the dinosaurs went. Yeah, meteorite was coming, so they just left.
I know which one is my favorite fracture.
Instantly.
Just what can I say? I love dinosaurs. When I was a child, I wanted to be a paleontologist. It was like my main thing back then. And even if it's not my main thing right now, I still love dinosaurs. Come on, they're freaking awesome.
Yeah, no, I can't dissuade that. Dinosaur groups are actually some of the monsters that I've already made for Novarch, that we already have some of the creature stats. I took some inspiration from things just because I knew that I was going to add them eventually. But that is one that I have in my back pocket. I was kind of going to focus a bigger on it. I'm just kind of slowly trying to figure out what might be super unique about it. Kind of like, why does it exist with it as being a fracture? Like, obviously, dinosaurs, period. But, like, I want to add in a little bit more, like, figuring out, like, I have sentient dinosaurs, but what is the culture there, right? What sort of items and stuff would you expect to exist there? Is the rules of magic different there, and to what extent are they different, right? I haven't fully fleshed out that sort of stuff, but I do
Yeah.
have some things.
So is it like one sentient dinosaur race, or are there multiples? And what kind of sentient dinosaurs are they?
So, the original concept, and I actually kind of, this is just the curse of being creative, things happening and coming out that are close to what you originally think of before you actually release it. So the original idea is kind of close to what happens in Rick and Morty with their sentient dinosaurs. They were supposed to be literally dinosaurs that are sentient, and actually one of the things about them was that they was going to have crystals, and that was going to be their magic sort of way. They stabilize their magic using magical crystals. But for the different types of things, it would literally just be, there are sentient dinosaurs and there are the non-sentient, and like they're just, the only difference is which ones are actual sentient or not, was the original concept. Though I've been kind of considering I could humanoid some of them, but like I kind of wanted to stray from that because I understand a lot of things wanting to be humanoid just because we ourselves are so used to that, but I wanted to like allow them to be dinosaurs. People are choosing, if they're choosing to build characters that are these sentient dinosaurs, because everything that's sentient will be a playable character. I wanted we know why they're choosing it. They want to be a dinosaur. I'm not going to take that away from them and being like, well, you're dinosaur-like, right? Like, no, you want to be a T-Rex? Okay, cool. You're a sentient T-Rex here.
So you can't play as the sentient T-Rex.
Huh?
So you can't play as a sentient T-Rex eventually.
Yes, you will be able to.
Nice. Can I play as a sentient Gigantosaurus?
I'm not, okay. I am actually not the strongest when it comes to dinosaur knowledge. Can you explain the Gigantosaurus? Is that one of the giant walkers?
The Gigantosaurus is technically bigger than the T-Rex, but I think he's supposed to be a little bit more slick, like less mass, but longer and taller. So
yeah, no, I'm okay with it existing, and thus the player being able to do one. Like I would need to stat it up essentially, but like for the most part, it would be very similar, from what I'm understanding, very similar to the T-Rex, just bigger.
Yeah.
And that's fine, because being bigger actually does have some drawbacks.
What drawbacks?
Being bigger, like obviously because you're bigger, you're much easier to hit when considering the smaller things, right? But like because you're bigger, certain things are going to just have certain actions are going to be at a hindrance of trying to do that. So like if they're trying to grapple you, I mean, arguably they'd be able to grapple you, but that doesn't mean that they're going to be able to do anything to benefit from that grappling, right? They can hug you, but like
I've got you. And he just keeps walking. So no, you're supposed to stop.
Right.
And then the big T-Rex is like a parent with their little kids. Oh no, you got me! I can't move. You're so strong.
Right. Oh no. So like there are some drawbacks from being too big, but like obviously I'll also some of the drawbacks could be not fitting into certain areas. If you're too big, your innate form, you're not going to be able to fit into a tiny little cave or castle that's made for normal human-sized creatures. So if you're trying to visit, like, a person at a business, they would have to come outside of the business, and you may not even like be able to freely walk around in downtown LA, right? Like, let's be real here.
Just walking around, so just Sir Tyrannosaurus Rex at your service. A monster, shoot it!
Right.
Oh my, how scandalous.
But I am not an asshole. And there is one of the spells that I have created for players who wanted to play something more monstrous, but not be shot at every 6 seconds. There's one of the spells of literally a human or humanoid disguise. You would still have to have like some things about you that would just people would be able to tell that it's you. But overall, it will change your shape to be more acceptable.
Yes, hello, fellow human. I'm definitely not a Tyrannosaurus Rex in disguise.
Right.
As you are, fellow human.
As you are. So it does seem that Eternal GM's power died locally. It just came back on.
All right.
So,
maybe he can still join us. But yeah, infrastructure going bad. And why don't you go to Germany? Our infrastructure is way more reliable. I got like in months in advance. By the way, your internet is going to go down from midnight to 6 in the morning occasionally. I hope it's not too much of a bother and you can plan that in your lives. And that's like literally the only time I had just the internet not work at all.
That's amazing.
I mean, okay, I live in a big city, right? And it's one of the richest big cities in Germany. So generally our infrastructure and our public transport is top of the line for at least for German standards.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're lucky when our water office actually messages on Facebook, of all places, that the water's going to be out.
That reminds me when we were once visiting my uncle in the USA, and there was this big blackout. I think eastern in the eastern coast. Was it the western? But yeah. And my parents were watching the television, and they just found it so funny that they were talking about how it's so unusual that this happens because the infrastructure was the best in America, and no, it was the best in the world, and even in America, and stuff like that. My parents just found that so funny. This mega American centric, and we Germans just like if where our infrastructure is separated, if you don't have any power, you still got your water. If you don't have any water or no power, you still got the phone. And there it was just all gone. So yeah. So of course I know you're a bit more open to the world, but some US Americans, they're just kind of just have no idea how it looks outside of the country. They get some wrong ideas of how high quality stuff over there really is.
Yeah, I've seen it. I see it around where I live. Like, it
Okay,
is insane.
I should stop dissing your home country.
No, I mean, keep going. Seriously, it's shitty over here.
But I also don't want to fall into the stereotype of the arrogant European. Oh yes, we are the superior continent. The U.S. Americans don't have. Look at those buffoons, with their non-functional democracy.
It's okay. I'm American. I'll say it. Look at those buffoons. I'm sorry. It's just there is. I think recent news can prove how little some Americans think, but that's just we're getting a little too close to more political.
Oh, so yeah, right. We don't want to talk about political stuff. You're right.
It's fair. I mean, I'm fine with it, but.
Oh yeah, you still owe me that. We wanted to have like a private discussion about our political views, didn't we?
Yeah, it just things got crazy on my end.
Yeah, also on my end. But yeah, let's do that sometime. But not live on stream, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So,
okay.
What is the political system of the dinosaur society?
So I can't actually answer that because, again, I haven't figured that out. That is still one of them that I'm kind of feeling of how I want to handle it. I did think of it being some form of... I was kind of thinking of it something based on kind of like... what's the term? I can't even think of the thing... I'm drawing a blank, but I haven't really fully fleshed out. I don't really want democratic, but I also don't want like some sort of kingship because that also feels kind of bland. I wanted something a little bit different.
I mean, their society had time to evolve for millions upon millions of years, right?
Mm-hmm.
So,
to be fair, who knows? There would be at least,
So who knows what could happen? They could become mega stagnant. They could evolve into something we couldn't even imagine nowadays.
Mm-hmm.
Also, a question: how long does the average dinosaur live? Right, that also impacts what kind of political systems and worldview they would have. If there would be more like elves,
there would be at least a minimum probably two groups. And I say that knowing that there is obviously the carnivores and the herbivores. I mean, obviously they may have been able to come together, but that initial thing could have sparked something for that side. Maybe it is closer to a dual leadership, one to lead the herbivores vote, one to lead the carnivores vote, you know.
And also the questions, do they have a caste system since they have so high biological diversions, or is it more like we know each of us have our strength and each of us does our role, but we are the same before the law or stuff like that? There's a lot of potential to make it a more exotic when it comes to government forms. That's also something when you're making fictional societies, to think what would form what kind of culture would they have, how would that inform their government, how their biology also impacts that and their environment, right? And not just copy paste. Yes, this is a Roman style republic, look, they even dressed like Romans.
How often do you think about the Roman Empire? No.
Well, I do have Asterix and a comic collection right here, and literally all of those issues have Romans. So technically, I daily see books that have the Roman Empire in them. Also, I
Fair
think
enough.
a lot about political philosophy, history. So yes, probably at least once a day. And yeah, I know the meme.
Yeah, yeah, no. Um,
There's a lot we can learn from the past, and I think many people forget that.
I mean, we can, but we have to make sure that we're not just looking at one part of the past too. There's been an entire world of past to learn from.
Yeah, a lot of mistakes we can learn from.
That is definitely true. Going back into the dinosaurs, though, while I can't answer like their political situation, I can actually go ahead and I'm going to spoil a little bit more about it. But one of the core concepts I know that I did come up with that I was going to go with is that this dinosaur land, while it is a fracture, it's actually made up of multiple micro fractures. So it's not just one, but they have actual technology to move between them very much easier. And this is what actually allows them to have multiple variations within the same sort of things. Because, of course, dinosaurs would have evolved differently in different biomes, and they needed to have those biomes. And the way that they had split was in arguably multiple little tiny fractures with their own sort of different biomes within them. So
Dangerous. I gotta admit, now that you mentioned the charts, my interest for the
mhm.
setting just increased tenfold.
Awesome. Yeah. I mean, I will honestly be completely honest. The fracture bit is one of my favorite things about it, just because it gives a lot of creative freedom to do stuff.
All right, but let's not just hyper focus on dinosaurs. What kind of political systems exist in Eternal GM? Wait,
Ah!
there he is. Hello. I think he still has to set everything. Hi, can you hear us?
Hey, sorry about the power outage.
It's
I
not
mean,
your
it's nothing
fault.
you did.
Yeah.
You didn't turn off the power.
No, but I sure waited till my phone had 5% power last night before laying down.
Okay,
So,
well, obviously that was a mistake, but
Yeah. The wall is now right behind me. I have to watch out on laughing or I'm just not the crap out of myself.
So
don't do that.
I would never tolerate 5% on my cell phone. If it's below 50%, I'm already like, it has to be charged now. I can't remember when it was the last time that it dropped below 30%. Like if it dropped below 30%, I would be in panic mode. I mean, not literal panic, but like I need to find a way to recharge it.
Yeah. I mean, I can't say that. I have a bad habit of not paying attention to my phone's battery. Like I'll be listen to music on it or something, and then not check it, and then the music stops, and I check my phone, and it's like, oh, it's dead. Oh, time to charge. But
for me, it's always that little phone has got the 20%. And I'm like, oh no.
Now that you're all talking about it, I was, by the way, what's the charge? So 85%. That's tolerable.
Tolerable.
You're like,
oh,
close.
It's 80%. I gotta charge it now.
I'm not that extreme, but if you fair to tolerate, should I charge it? And I'm like, come on, Jan. Come on, don't overdo it. Also, I just realized my charger is currently plugged into the camera, so it's not like I can charge it right now anyway.
Fair enough.
So, I've been running on fumes when it comes to the question Eternal about the setting. So, what kind of questions did you prepare?
Well, like one of the interesting ones I had was that I saw when people were asking like about what questions to ask, you had said that yours is this type of setting, but then someone mentioned multi-diverse and dimensional. So how do you handle having a multi-dimensional but core setting in your setting?
Okay, so I'm going to, for those who's watching this later or now even, I'm going to kind of go into something that I've already explained, but just because for the sake that you wasn't able to watch while you wasn't here, because well, no power. I'm going to kind of go into that. So very quickly, NovArchaic has multiple things, or has these things called fractures. So the setting system in and of itself, something that I have gone on record as being purposefully nondescript, happened in the past before magic had left the world, that actually forced the people at the time's hands to separate magic from the world. But they wasn't perfect, and they was dealing with forces and capabilities that they themselves not knew how to handle properly. That being said, they split it in kind of a poor way, creating not only just the core world, right, which is our normal setting, our modern world, but also multiple places called fractures, which are multiple realities, but they are unique in that they aren't full places, right? They are maybe a location or something that's been created their own thing, and they may or may not have magic in that area because of how the magic was split. The core world does not have magic at the time of the start of things, right? Like for the long time since that thing, core world did not have magic, and so it kind of grew how our world does, of just not having magic. But some fractures, like one that I've gone on record talking about, I have a place called Elfenheim, which has some things that like from Norse mythology, but also just elf mythology or Fae mythology. So like European sort of stuff exist in it. That in that area, like you have the Valkyries from Norse mythology, you have the Fae courts. But one of the things that kind of split there is that in that fracture is something that is making death-based magic, more strong. So the Fae Winter Court becomes exceptionally powerful. And within the time between the two things, and at the start of the normal setting, the Fae Winter Court is one of the only Fae courts left. So much so that to actually answer a question that was actually just asked about like some of the political systems within these courts, they have a kingdom, right? Like they have actually created a kingdom within with the Winter Court, instead of being a court, now just being a monarchy, and within the Elfenheim. So yeah, I one of the main reasons I do the fracture and reason I handle it that way is because now creating that, the GMs can create their own fractures, right? If people want to make stuff, they can make their own fractures. If I want to add in a new book later on and be like, okay, let's explore something unique, I can make a fracture to introduce it, right? So
that's pretty cool. Does like access to something like elemental planes change within them? Does technology also vary, like their perceived perception in a timeline? Does that vary between them?
the time, so actually that kind of goes into a question that was already asked prior as well. The rules of physics does not normally change. Like for the most part, there should be not really any of them rules of physics should change at all. And if the rules of physics did change between each fracture, that's something to go and kind of question. Why is the rules of physics changed? But the rules of magic does change. So like the Alvenheim, if you cast death magic there, it may be different and more powerful than if you cast it in the core world, right? This is, of course, assuming all the fractures still exist at the time that you're playing, because there are, in timelines, you can go further into the future where the worlds do come back into one giant world again. That's neither here nor there. That's just a little side thing that I actually hadn't talked about. But when it comes to tech level, right, another fracture that I've kind of gone over was what I call the scrapyard, which is actually very much more science fantasy, high robot sort of area, right? But still has magic, and it still exists, but its tech level is much higher, right?
Okay.
So the tech level would be different. I mean, you have to consider that they've had a minimum a couple thousand years to kind of develop their own sort of cultures and societies and tech levels.
That's pretty interesting. Is the Earth the only place that these are occurring, or have like people traveled out in space and found fractures on totally alien planets?
You could have fractures on different. So fractures are of reality, not of space.
Okay.
Right? So yes, you could have fractures that would mean that an alien would now exist. Martians could now exist, right? There is now people on Mars because they was part of the worlds of reality, but then the fracture split and they just kind of into the nothingness, or to our perception in the core world into nothingness. When in reality they just went into a different fracture. And when the worlds start coming back, maybe they'll go back to Mars, and then hey, yeah, no, we always existed. We just kind of got lost.
See, that makes me think of like you had like the idea of a group of people that's their whole deal. Their planet was destroyed, so now we just travel from fracture to fracture to fracture, like trying to find the best semblance of our old life.
Yeah, no, that would be a wonderful adventure module, actually, just playing people going between different fractures that are trying to find their way back home. Yeah, no, that would be really interesting. And just for sake of catching up, I will describe one other fracture, and that was one that me and we've already kind of talked a good bit about, because it was based around, well, not based on his things, but his interest was based off of being very interested, and that was the dinosaur fracture, explaining that there is the Lost World fracture, which is full of dinosaurs, insentient dinosaurs, that they actually existed before the original split. They made their fractures before the original split and had done their split because of the meteorite that would have destroyed all of them. It was actually they all left the sentient ones and bringing in some of the non-sentient ones into a fracture away, knowing how to fracture things off. And it's not until the setting, the timeline that all these fractures are starting to come back, that they also come back to see how their old home changed.
Yeah. That's actually really kind of cool, the sentient dinosaur thing. Like, I'm old enough to have grown up seeing some of that old dinosaur show where they were in costumes, and like that just made me think of that, but in a lot more like potentially tech and violent way. It's like, oh, we've been gone for thousands of years. You built homes on our graveyard. He's like, what? Are they haunted? No, but we're about to shoot you.
Oh, World War III, humanity versus dinosaurs. That would be hardcore.
Just an
So
pterodactyl going after the Air Force.
Actually, that was one of the plots I wrote down and actually ran a couple of games about because as I kind of explained, but of course you wasn't here, Eternal. The way that I normally explained the fracture situation was like there was the core world, and then all of the fractures like split away, but eventually something occurred, or eventually they kind of stretch, like as though they have like rubber bands on them, and so they start crushing in, right? So these people, all these fractures are starting to crush into, and so there's kind of this whole like situation where they have to do something to make these things slow down so the reality just doesn't collapse upon itself, right? Because that reality shouldn't do that. But right after that in the timeline of NovArchaic is what I call just the world of the wars of the worlds, because it's all of these different cultures now meeting each other after a couple thousand years, not only hearing of each other through like legends and stuff, not knowing what they're going into. So there's going to be a lot of responses that are going to be aggressive, specifically like the Winter Court being a kingdom now coming in, people of their land start coming in and seeing these sort of things. They're going to take like, well, no, we're going to come in and kind of stake our claim here. If we're going to start popping up and this is going to become our things, we need to set boundaries, right?
I just have this image of a T-Rex with a magical armor, and there's a tank, and the tank shoots him, and the magical armor just tanks it, and he just comes rushing through the explosion, and the T-Rex with his helmet that enhances his bite just bites into the tank, ripping metal out of there.
Yeah. Sounds rad.
Yeah.
I love it.
It also makes me think of the only hunting game I've ever played, because you got to play a deer that went around and hunted the hunters.
Oh, that one. I've seen a let's
I've
play.
never heard of that. That sounds so hilarious.
You have to play it, even if it's just for 10 minutes. There was so many jokes that me as a little 10-year-old kid could get them, but there's probably like layers of stuff intended for older people.
I'm starting to think that you're talking about a different game. Because the one let's play I saw was more nuanced with a bit of indie horror woven into that, and it sounds like you're describing a funny game.
No, these people made like serious hunting games, and then they released one that was you got to play the deer now. So it's called Deer Hunter, I think, and they scratched out the deer and put Human Hunter. So you're playing the deer and you're going around shooting hunters. It's really just old, early 2000s stupid kind of comical game.
Yeah.
The only hunting
So I
game.
found it on Wikipedia. I'm assuming it is. Anyway, it's called Deer Avenger. But they scratch out Hunter and put Avenger. So it was Deer Hunter, but it becomes Deer Avenger. And they had 4 games in the series.
Really?
From 98 to 2001.
Okay. So late 90s, early 2000s humor.
Yeah.
Sorry, I still have this. Right, there isn't an English word for Kopfkino, right? Head cinema is the word. So basically just the movie playing out with the battle tanks versus T-Rex as the soldiers shooting, pterodactyls coming in, shooting magical beams. It's so awesome.
Yeah. That was one of the planned.
Your War Greymon going against an army.
Oh
yes. Actually, I'm going to do a side on that. I've actually ran a Digimon game using NovArchaic as the core mechanics. That was actually not even that long ago. Just because it's just so Digimon
I
is
want
great.
to play in Ishanek on World Shapers Digimon campaign, but not like the Digimons, not having like their Digidestins or Digitamers, but just independently acting. Just playing like a Metal Greymon. Sorry. Digimon is my childhood series. I wasn't allowed to watch TV, but I was allowed to record a few things. And I recorded Digimon and Detective Conan. And Digimon, that's like my childhood, man.
Like, ironically, that because you actually asked a question about my inspiration, and Digimon was one of them for the settings of NovArchaic, just because the magical technology that they had was just everything I wanted. It is literally that sort of magi tech bullshittery go. Like, that is delicious to me.
I love Digimon. And
I'm
the whole...
one of the Pokemon fans that will tell any other Pokemon fan, you do realize we have to level up. Agumon can just straight become War Greymon because of some random bond that happened in that fucking moment because he was going to die. Yeah. All of a sudden, you now are launching a nuke, and my Charmander's going, Ember?
What am I doing? Tell me what I'm doing!
It's not going to work, sir.
Yeah, I remember in Death Battle they had Red with Charizard versus Tai with Agumon, and I was like, this is not a competition, man. Like, the Charizard doesn't freaking stand a chance.
Right.
I mean, I do also like Pokemon, currently playing Pokemon Fusion. Awesome game. But Digimon just has a special place in my heart, you know?
Digimon World 2 was probably the favorite game of mine, period, from all of Digimon.
Never played 2, just 1 and 3. Love both of them.
There was some virus or something in the digital world, so you have to ride in these little tanks to kind of go where
I've seen videos about that, and also a lot of people telling that it wasn't that good, so I was surprised when you mentioned that. But I mean, I've never played it, so who knows?
Yeah, it's totally different style than the first one, but it just hit for some reason with me. I guess having played Dragon Warrior Monsters, I was kind of used to the idea of having 3 creatures going versus 3, so
3v3
kind of in line.
Yeah, I don't remember playing Digimon World 2. I remember doing, what was it, like 2003 or something? I don't remember the exact name, but it was a very weird name. But I mean, yeah, I mean, Digimon's great. That's all I gotta say. Pokemon is also great. I do enjoy Pokemon as well, but yeah. I will say Digimon was more of inspiration for the setting of NovArchaic, at least the style of the Magi tech, than Pokemon was. Like, yeah, Pokemon has like some really interesting concepts for its technology that could be applied and made really interesting as well. Like Pokeballs in the concept of themselves, of the foldable, like taking something and turning it into digital data, if you will, to like store that Pokemon. That is really interesting. But I don't know.
I just feel Dragon Ball Z did it better with Capsule Corp. I mean, I'm a big Pokemon fan, but they weren't really innovative with technology besides the PC, Pokédex, and Pokeball. And I just feel Capsule Corp did it better.
I mean, Capsule Corp was interesting as well, but again, I think the issue with me for Capsule Corp was that they didn't express how it was magical or if it was more of science, like, and how even trying to fake, like, doing pseudoscience sort of things of why it does. It's just, no, it does that, period. That's all it got.
It's definitely technology. Bulmer and her father are technology people.
Yeah, I know. It's just what I'm kind of like implying is that they didn't world build using it. It was just kind of there as a plot device.
You're saying they as if it wasn't one guy inventing the whole universe.
Well, I mean,
Akira Toriyama.
Right. Yeah. I mean, even when it comes to that, he had people who like worked with him on it.
And meddled in the creation.
Exactly. forcing things to go on longer than he really wanted it to. Cough, cough, GT. Anyways.
I mean, GT is a separate thing, right? It isn't really canon, and it basically he barely had anything to do with that. But
Right.
But I'm still talking just about Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z. That's mainly his creation, with occasionally meddling from other people. With his editor heavily meddled into the Cell the Android saga. With what the bad guy is just an old guy and just a fat doll. And okay, fine, new bad guys. Now they're just bratty kids. Do something else. All right, creepy biological abomination. So, he looks too disgusting. Change it. Fine, I'll make him more humanoid. Now he looks like an idiot. It's just like, no wonder that he only agreed on doing the Busa. If he just had 100% control over that, but. Somebody just keeps telling me your villain sucks, change it.
But I will even say that he was feeling kind of like a story fatigued by the time that he also hit the Cell and Boo sagas. And you can definitely tell that.
Like with the Boo saga, totally. Like the Boo saga is definitely the worst. The Android saga, he still had a bit of gas left, but he really wanted to stop afterwards, after this Cell saga.
Right.
All right.
Anyways, we have gotten way too far off the deep end.
All right. Well, does your setting have gods or no?
Yeah.
And how does that interact with the... oh, man, I completely dropped the word.
We actually already talked about that. Those were one of my earliest questions. So
I'll give you the cliff notes. So there is gods, but the definition of God is very kind of flexible at the moment, because there are gods that you can kill and there's gods that you probably can't. There are people who have powers that are arguably like gods. Like there's one individual who is like a god within the Scrapyard fracture, which is more of a science fiction, but with some high sort of things, who's the one who actually created that fracture. And he has powers like a god, but as of right now, he could be killed. And players can tap into gods, their devotion to gods, to do special things. So... I have purposely not gotten into too much detail because I'm still kind of balancing what gods I'm setting up, but I'm also kind of allowing GMs to kind of do that to their own course, because when it comes down to things, most GMs will change that themselves anyways. And I want to give them the tools of creation to be able to handle that themselves.
Okay. Let's see.
any more questions left?
My cat is stuck on the window.
Another question. Just a statement. Interesting cat. Interesting
Does the cat have a question? Are there any sentient cats?
Cat was over there like stuck on a curtain looking at me like, please.
To answer are there sentient cats? One of the planned races to go, not necessarily to go along with, but the fact that they're sentient dinosaurs, yes. I was actually planning on making enlightened animals, which are sentient animals, which would be cat.
First I hear enlightened cannibals, and I was like,
oh no.
What?
Yeah, enlightened cannibals. They get more power the more people they eat, but it have to be of the same species.
So what about the things like your vampires, werewolves, wraiths, mummies? Does that kind of exist?
Yes. Though I only have rules for vampires and one type of werewolf right now. Vampires are... So the cursed-based vampire exists, where you have the vampire's curse, which is kind of one of the initial reasons why some vampires existed was they was cursed, sort of thing. And you can get that curse on your character, and it will change some things. You need to have increased blood consumption for your food consumption, sort of thing. You get some benefits, some capabilities with blood-based magic, etc. And it's pretty much similar to where a lot of vampires and werewolf as a character option is more of side grades than upgrades, because they're side grades with high potential for an upgrade, I guess, to put that. It will change your basics, but then once those basics have been changed, you can kind of level up into those powers, or have the character, be it a player or non-player, level up into those powers to kind of really hit that vampire master sort of thing, or werewolf master sort of thing. So they do exist, at least for those two. I do have rules for ghosts. I don't have mummies yet, or zombies, but that's on the to-hit list to have those. And I am also looking at doing other variations of those. So, like, I had specified the first-based vampire. I actually had an idea of a diseased-based vampire, which is arguably another type of thing we've seen in some media for the disease that costs vampirism, or creates a vampirism-like thing, and other sort of things like that. Maybe some other changes, but that will be future stuff.
Future vampires with lasers.
Future vampires with lasers. Actually, yes. Vampires with lasers is obviously the big book on vampires title. No.
Oh. So, do you, and I have things like, because I know that like one teleport can ruin the whole story of Lord of the Rings, but do you have teleporting magic to that degree in your world? Can people teleport around, or do you limit certain types of magic for storytelling or in lore reasons?
So I'm going to preface, this gets into a little bit of the design of not just the story, but also mechanics, but I'm just prefacing it just for logic here. I, as a designer, don't like the concept of spells as answers as much as spells as tools, right? None of the spells I have designed have been an answer to anything. So you don't get instant victory to know something for casting a spell that allows you to know this very specific thing, right? None of those spells are designed in that way. They are designed to allow you to do something that maybe you wouldn't normally be able to do, but not to answer a thing. So, would there be spells to teleport around? Arguably, yes, but there's going to be limits and there's going to be high costs, especially when you get into big transportation sort of things like that. So if you're trying to, actually, one of the things is teleporting between two locations, like actually teleporting between the fractures. There is a spell to do that. It costs 15 minutes, and I think there's a couple other things I have set up, and it can only teleport to very specific locations known as, I want to call them hubs, but I don't think that's the actual term I used. But think of them like teleportation hubs, where they have specifically been made to be locations to teleport to. That is the easiest place without like spending a lot of extra time and resources to teleport to, using that sort of thing. You make a portal to a hub location and you can go there.
Is Stonehenge a teleportation hub?
You know what? I like that idea. It wasn't. Now it is. I'm writing that down right now.
My first thought was
set up the core works.
My first thought: if you can only teleport to teleportation hubs, what about the core world that doesn't have like magic at all, why it wouldn't have any teleportation happen. And then I was like, oh, ancient constructs, Stonehenge, druid circles.
Stonehenge would be a great one. Maybe some other like ancient like places. Like maybe there's one in the pyramids, right?
Yeah, that's also what I was thinking.
I mean, there could be so many different ones. I just need to figure out like what they're the like
Ancient Shinto
where to put them.
gates or ancient Shinto shrines.
Right.
How old is Shintoism again?
Dude, who knows? No. I don't know off the top of my head.
Let's just Google it. Shintoism. Shinto. Japan, blah, blah. I want an H, buddy. Polymistic. 300 BC to 300 DC.
Okay.
When was the fracture in your setting?
I have not set the exact year. So,
Okay.
But it is an arguable thing where it could have probably been something.
Just imagine just some British archaeologist or a tour guide in Stonehenge, and suddenly a T-Rex with magic armor appears there.
Yes. That would be one of the locations. Yep. Based on that spell, that would be one of the locations that would be a hub, because that actually makes perfect sense. Stonehenge and other sort of things. I'm totally down for that.
You know, you could always make it some weird time travel thing that, you know, it's an event that hasn't happened, but once it did, it actually fractured everywhere in space, but also in time. So these have technically now always been a thing, and reality is now structured around them, but it's an event that hasn't yet happened in your setting.
So I will say that the event, I have stated that the event did happen in the past, but like I do like the idea that kind of things are kind of wibbly wobbly when it comes to the time part, because you're right, reality is the combination of space and time. So there could be something there.
So maybe the dinosaurs have not been living for millions of years because the time kind of worked different there. So they did not have like this huge technological development advantage.
Maybe not. We'll get there when I get deeper into the world building on the dinosaur, the sentient dinosaurs. Any other questions?
I had mentioned elemental planes earlier, but I think we got kind of pulled onto parts of what I mentioned. How did those take part in your setting, and what would be the elemental common? Like, do you use 4? Do you have 6?
So I haven't actually sat down and decided what I'm going to do for the base elements for like all things. Though I do have definition of some elementals, because there are some already elemental species that a player can be. That being said, there is no elemental plane. Like, that's very much a Dragon game sort of concept that I didn't really necessarily like, but that doesn't mean that there's not a fracture that would be elemental, right? Because as stated, that's the entire concept of these fractures, is that they was there to separate the building blocks of magic to stop this big bad thing, right? So there will be fractures that will be closer to aligned to elemental planes. I just don't have any of them currently developed of what I would want, because I need not just the fracture going to be an elemental one, but I also need to figure out like what group of things would live there. Why does that fracture exist? Was it like one of the base reasons, or like the basic reason of the original fracturing? Or is this something more closely tied to something else happened that caused that fracture to exist, and to what extent does that do it? Who's up?
Are fractions planets of their own, like basically a copy of Earth, or are they more like fragments of continents that still exist in a physical reality just because the fracture works like that? So still having a sun circle.
I have thought of them more like I'm actually going to use another location because the core concept is very similar to it. Atlantis. So it's less of a copy. It could be a copy depending on the fracture, right? But it's normally more of like a location that no longer exists and kind of, or it should have existed, and now it doesn't, right? So Atlantis, the whole story of that, of just it going into the sea or whatever, it could have actually been a fracture itself. Maybe that's one where one of the elemental fractures are, right? We could say like it could be the easy answer. That's a fracture that is tied to the elemental water, right? Or we spin that tail in our own direction and choose another element to be like, actually, you would think that because of the stuff, but.
But one question, then what happens if you're in a fracture and just start walking into one direction? Do you get to an end? Do you like turn around on the other? Do you get to the other side? What happens?
So normally the way that I've been running them is it depends on the fracture, I guess. But like, so the bigger ones, like the ones I've kind of already talked about,
Elfheim, for example.
Elfenheim. Yeah, that one, for example, I would actually definitely see that one you walk into the edge and would wrap around to another location, right? Mm-hmm. But some of them that are like smaller, like maybe even the scrapyard, you get to the edge and it's actually more like you're on a kind of this plane of a floating rock inside of a magical nothingness, right?
Right. But when we're talking about fractures like Elfheim, is it just like seamless? Do you continue walking?
It would be seamless to the people, so they wouldn't even know that that's the case.
Okay,
completely.
Got it. So, 3 minutes left until the stream is over. Any final thoughts?
Final question, I guess.
It comes up.
Okay.
I went through my questions like 2 or 3 ago, and so I was up with extra ones on the spot because like more things had come up with talking to me. It's like the fractures were cool in themselves, but the ideas of questions it brought up to me, kind of I was just going in a circle around fractures after I'd gotten enough of the questions.
Oh yeah, fractures are really cool conceptually. It's one of my favorite things about designing the setting. I really love them. I'm happy that I came up with them when I did, and been working on them ever since then, because I do think that it gives it a very interesting sort of feel. And yeah.
Make one of them. Yeah, sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Make one of the Mayan temples teleportation hub.
Okay. Sure. Sounds great.
I want dinosaurs in the middle of the Mexican jungle appearing. Sorry. Like it's your setting, but I think it would also be fitting. Mayan temples are also ancient, and all sort of mysticism is bound into them. You know, somebody who has Mayan DNA.
I guess there is one thing that I didn't talk about that I want to kind of like throw in, just as like a thought, is that even though I had said like there is essentially no magic in the core world during the time that the fractures are away, there really was some. One of the things that you had mixed, Eternal, is I talked about a creature, a very specific creature that I haven't described very specifically, that hunted magic that may have been created because of the spell that created the fractures, living in the core world, and there had to have been reasons why it was hunting in the core world, right? What was it hunting? So I'm going to leave with the fact that there was some magic just hidden.
All right, that's the 2-hour mark. So I'll say we stop that with this mysterious hidden magic. What could it be?
Hidden magic.
I say it's
Yeah,
tiny elves.
amazing. It's like, but it was hidden. Thanks for joining. No.
But it was gone.
All right, everybody. See you next week. We'll be diving into another setting. We're not sure which one, but maybe one of Archaic on World Shapers. We'll see about that. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.